The market is very focused on the vaccine timeline, even more so, it appears, than the rising case numbers we're seeing right now. Talk us through the exact step-by-step, when you expect the green light from the FDA and what the timing process looks like from there.
Well, the application just went in today, and I'll just say at the outset, this is a really historic achievement by the company, by the volunteers. 43,000 people entered these clinical trials, 150 clinical trial sites by different clinicians who stood up those clinical trial sites, and the work of FDA as well, which provided very timely feedback that make this possible. Peter Marks and my former colleagues in the vaccine review division at the agency. It's going to probably take FDA 2 to 4 weeks to review this application. There's going to be an advisory committee meeting in early December. The date's already been announced for that, the second week of December. I would expect that you could see some action by mid-December if everything goes well, that the FDA feels comfortable with the data that's been submitted to the agency. And then it would just be a matter of days before you start to see vaccine get into the supply chain. So you could potentially start vaccinating that first tranche of patients, which I would expect to be elderly patients, maybe patients in nursing homes and other institutional settings who are at high risk of contracting COVID and also at high risk of having a bad outcome. You could start potentially vaccinating them third week, fourth week of December. So this could be available in time to have an impact on this current wave that we're dealing with this virus.
The mRNA vaccines being developed by Pfizer and Moderna have never been used before, correct, Dr. Gottlieb?
That's right. I mean, all the platforms that we're using here are novel. So the mRNA platforms are novel. Other companies are working on viral vector vaccines that are novel, and then the protein-based vaccines are adjuvanted, so they're novel as well. We've used new technologies to try to address this.
Yeah. So my question is, what do we know about potential long-term side effects? And should people be worried about that, given that we haven't tested for it yet?
Yeah, I mean, the platform should be safe. If what you're doing is you're delivering a segment of RNA, a segment of genetic material that codes for the production of the protein that you want to develop immunity against, in this case, the spike protein, which is a protein on the surface of the virus. And so as long as you're delivering that RNA and it's getting translated, meaning it's getting picked up by your body and turned into proteins, which it seems to be doing in the clinical trials and in the assays, it should work, and it should be relatively safe. What you're doing is effectively just exposing someone to the protein from the virus. And so there are potential side effects of being exposed to that viral protein. The question is, does the RNA platform itself have any theoretical risks associated with it? And we won't know everything about this. You're right, it's very novel technology. But by the time this vaccine is available for widespread distribution, we're going to have a lot of long-term safety follow-up. And we're going to have more safety data, not just from the clinical trial, the 44,000 patients who've been given this vaccine in the clinical trial, or half of them were placebo, but also people who are going to get this in the real world, the people who are going to be vaccinating right now. I wouldn't expect the vaccine to be licensed for general use until maybe mid-next year, maybe the second quarter of next year. So by the time this is widely available, we'll have a lot more data around its long-term safety.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gottlieb. Long time no see. I was going to ask how concerned you are, how worried you are about the potential issues in the rollout in the early months of the vaccine and how complicated that is, given how we know it has to be transported at such low temperatures and things like that.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the cold chain storage. What I am concerned about is the way it's going to be distributed by the federal government to states. They're creating special sites to distribute this vaccine. So getting vaccinated might be a little bit like voting, where you have to go to a certain place in a certain window of time in order to get the vaccine. And that creates friction. And that friction ends up potentially putting at a disadvantage people who already face obstacles to getting access to care. So governors do need to think about how to push this vaccine out into underserved communities. And they're doing that. I've talked to a number of governors who are thinking of things like mobile vans to go into communities to get high-risk people vaccinated. The initial population that's likely to be eligible for this is likely to be people in nursing homes or long-term care facilities. We know where those individuals are. So getting the vaccine to that first tranche of patients probably will be easier because you could just go into the facilities and vaccinate people. And CVS and Walgreens have partnered with the federal government to do that. It's probably the second tranche where you're trying to go into communities and vaccinate an elderly population that might be homebound, might not have access to the sites where you're distributing the vaccine, that you really need to push this out into the communities.
Dr. Gottlieb, as far as what's going on right now, we are seeing some restrictions increase. It's tough because it would be hard to go back into lockdown to really squash the curve and change the trajectory of these rising hospitalizations. What about curfews, though? Do they work? We're seeing Governor Newsom, just the latest in a string of governors implementing curfews 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., I think, in California. Does that really do anything?
Well, what we've seen is the targeted mitigation doesn't work nearly as effectively as the broad-based shutdowns and what we call lockdowns. But we're not going to do broad-based shutdowns and lockdowns like what Europe did. We know that's just not going to happen here. And so we're really stuck taking more targeted steps, which are going to have a slower effect.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.